Hi everyone and welcome to MyHealth RCSI. My name is Dr. Claire Behan and today we're diving into the topic movement for healthy brains. We all know movement is good for our bodies, but it's really good for our brains too. So we're going to explore how movement and physical activity can not only have protective factors for our brain, but also empower people living with neurological conditions such as epilepsy and Parkinson's. Now, I am delighted to welcome our expert guests who are joining me for today's conversation, Ailish, Ian and Norman. You're very welcome to our panel today. Thank you for joining us. Okay, so Ian, we might come to you first. Okay. So could you tell us a little bit about Ian before Parkinson's, before the diagnosis?
Sure. I was a pretty active person, very outgoing. Played soccer, not to a good level, but I enjoyed playing it for my mates and stuff like that. Did a little bit of running. You know, I was active, like I said, working. Everything was good, good lifestyle, wife, kids. Everything seemed perfect, if you want to put it like that.
Okay, great. And then when did things start taking a turn?
Yeah, believe it or not, anxiety and depression were my first symptoms. And looking back now, I had a lot of movement issues, but the anxiety and depression was really taking me over at the time. And I mentioned I was outgoing. I went into myself. I didn't want to answer the phone. I didn't want to talk to people. I struggled to go to work in the morning. I couldn't wait to get home and go to bed again. Thought just needed a good night's sleep. And every time I got a night's sleep, I just woke up the next morning and the same problems were there again. So this spiraled for a while, you know, and got into a really bad place for a while.
And then age 38.
Yeah. So I'd broken my wrist in a drinking accident, and I thought some of the movement was because I'd broken my wrist. So went to my physical therapist, and he basically said everything was fine. And I just, in a passing comment, said to him, "It's like my brain tells my hand what to do, and it doesn't do it." I knew his face changed. He just very nicely said, "Go back to your GP and tell him you want to see a neurologist." So I went to the GP, and I asked to see a psychiatrist and a neurologist. Got the preferred letters. The neurologist was the first person I got the appointment with, and 15 minutes after walking in the door, he said, "You've got Parkinson's disease." So, yeah, that was the start of it.
How did you process that?
Believe it or not, and I tell people they're kind of a bit shocked when I mention this, but it was a relief, because, especially from the anxiety depression side of things, I now had a reason why I was experiencing it, and it all kind of made sense. Now I bawled my eyes out, you know, the first day it was a bit of a shock, but at least I knew what I was dealing with then, you know, and I knew there was a way of dealing with it, and I did. And I suppose I was lucky enough I could step away from work at the time. I started exercising more because during that period where I wasn't well, I kind of stepped away from exercise, so I got back into exercise, and I started taking my medication. Which one helped the best? It was a combination of the three, but you know, I'm happy to say that 10 years, nearly 8 years on, I'm probably feeling better now than I did back then, you know.
Okay.
So.
And you talked about you exercised beforehand. Did the exercise change after Parkinson's? Did you have to adapt and do a different type of exercise?
I started doing different exercise. I actually still play football.
Okay.
Very badly. I managed the over 35 local football team. When they're stuck for players, I'll bring them myself on. I went in goal once and I left in 5 goals in the first half, so I don't think that's a very good place for me to be. But you know, it's a bit of fun, and I'll come back to that later about you know the exercise type thing. But the physical therapist that I went to was actually a friend of mine, and when I went back and told him that I had Parkinson's disease, he said, "We're climbing Carrantoul on the weekend," and I said, "No, I'm not." And he goes, "Yes, you are." And he said, we're doing it. He brought me down. I climbed Carrantoul. I'd never climbed it before. I'd done a bit of hiking. I was into the outdoors, but it wasn't my go-to thing. And there's something, when I got on top of Carrantoul, it was like, if I can get on top of Ireland's highest mountain, I can get on top of my diagnosis. And things kicked on from there.
Brilliant. Norman, I might bring you in here. Ian's told us about the different types of exercises done, the challenges that he's faced in terms of having to slightly alter some of the exercise that he has done. What's happening to our brains? Why do we feel good when we exercise? Why is it good for us?
Probably a number of factors. It's a difficult question to answer and distill in one simple kind of explanation. But first of all, getting outdoors is good for our mental health, I think, and again, we don't talk about that enough. Getting out into nature, climbing Carron Tool is a huge sense of achievement, particularly after a diagnosis. You know, that's incredible. In terms of what's happening in our brains when we exercise, there's release of dopamine, the reward chemical. People have talked about the endorphin high. Whether that's actually true or not is debatable. You know, the endorphins are our kind of intrinsic brain opiates, and then there's probably release of things like endocannabinoids, which are related to the good types of compounds that are in cannabis. There's also an increased level of brain-derived neurotrophic factor, which is also positive in terms of neurogenesis and synaptic formation within the brain. There are some studies that show that people who exercise regularly have higher brain volumes in general, and also higher volumes of the hippocampi or hippocampus on both sides of the body, which is important for emotional regulation and memory processing. So it's multifactorial. But there's no doubt, I think, that there's widespread agreement now that regular exercise in people who do not have underlying conditions, and there's lots of research on that, and people who do have, within reason of course, who do have some underlying neurological condition, that regular exercise, and we can talk about what the definition of regular is in this context, is extremely beneficial. Along with a number of other factors for our brain health. And we should mention there are other modifiable risk factors, if you like, for preventing things like neurodegenerative disease, Alzheimer's disease, other dementias. Regular exercise, good nutrition is extremely important, good sleep is important, social interaction is important, making sure your blood pressure is important, not smoking is extremely important. So they all have to be tied in together. So again, it's I suppose a long enough winded answer to your question, because unfortunately that's
of course,
what's needed.
That's the nature of the brain, it's complex.
Yeah.
Ailish, we might bring you in next. In terms of the types of exercise that people can do and the supports that can be put in place, could you just tell us a little bit about that and some of the research that you've led in this area?
Sure, thanks Claire. I think one of the great things about this topic is that we've a great body of evidence to show the benefits of lots of different types of exercise. So we know that exercise that strengthens our muscles can improve muscle strength, but also it makes everyday activities easier for people, and we know that these are the things that really matter to people. It can improve walking, it can reduce falls, which again is really important because falls can be a real setback for people living with neurological conditions. We also know that exercise that challenges our heart and lungs, so what we might call cardiovascular exercise, that's really important. The World Health Organization and the HSE actually recommend 150 minutes a week, so that's half an hour, 5 days a week. So we're exercising most days of the week in a way that gets our heart rate up, gets us breathing faster, gets us feeling a little bit warmer. That type of exercise not only benefits movement and what we call a physical function, but it also has great benefits for mental health. We know from some of our research in people with neurological conditions that they're less likely to experience depression if they're active regularly, so more than twice a week, and that also thinking and remembering, so what we call our cognitive functions, can also improve after exercise-based interventions. And I think another consistent finding that people don't always expect from these studies is that when we ask people how they found those exercises, they actually really enjoy them. So the enjoyment scores are really high. And I think that's really important to say, that it's not about no pain, no gain. I don't think that phrase applies here at all. It's actually about finding what you enjoy and sticking with that. And the guidelines would also suggest that it's not that, so different types of exercise will target different functions in the body, but actually it's a variety of exercise that gets us the best overall health benefits.
Okay. Ian, you mentioned the struggles that you had with the anxiety and depression before you had your diagnosis. Do you feel that the exercise, the hiking, you might talk about the amazing feat of endurance that you...
Yeah, the hiking ticked a lot of boxes for me, because it's exercise. There's nobody putting pressure on you. You can do it with friends. You can do it on your own. You can stop and have something to eat. You can take in the scenery. You know, there's a lot going on, and it really benefited me. Like just getting out in the open, getting into nature, and did loads for me, and just kind of helped me to, you know, have time with myself. and kind of process the diagnosis. I kind of kicked it on from there. I mentioned I got the top Karen tool, and helped me with my dealing with it as well. So I started looking at the highest points in all of the European countries. As you do, in spare time. And I kind of said, I wonder could I get to the top of all the EU countries in a short period of time. So I came up with this idea myself to get to the highest point in all the EU countries, 27 of them, and the UK. So that's 28 countries in 28 days straight. So it took a bit of planning, which I'm probably more proud of than actually the feat itself. But I did it. Didn't get to the top of one or two. That's all part of the story. But it was a great achievement from a team point of view, because a lot of my friends were involved. I raised money for charity. I got to talk to other people with Parkinson's. People reached out to me because I'd done that event. And it's something that I'm very proud of.
Yeah, so you should be. What was the favourite peak?
Everyone asked me the favourite peak in the point, and I have favourites, and I've gone back to loads of them over the last couple of years as well. But my favourite point of the whole 28 days was at some stage in the middle of Europe in a minivan with my mates, laughing and joking and having fun. Mm-hmm. That was definitely the highlight. It was like being back in college again and just having a bit of fun. So that was the high point.
Ailish, obviously everyone won't be climbing 28 mountains in 28 days. But in terms of the supports that can be put in place for people, or the things that they can do, that they can start today.
Yeah, I think that's a great question about how to get started, because it's something people with neurological conditions can really struggle with. And I think that's perfectly understandable given the different ways that conditions affect people and the challenges they pose. And often when we say you need to do 150 minutes a week for your best health benefits, that can sound a bit scary to people. So it's often reassuring to say to them that actually you get health benefits from every bit that you do. So let's just start where we're at and work from there. And I often start by asking people, what is it that you enjoy? Because it's the exercise that you enjoy is the one you're going to stick at. And for that can be very different things to different people. For some people it might be being in nature, for some people it might be water-based exercise, some people might love music being a part of it and doing some dancing. Sometimes it's about being part of a team, or maybe a competitive aspect, or tracking your own progress. So it's about figuring out what is it that really drives and motivates you, and what might make it more likely for you to stick with that. Another factor that can be really helpful is finding a tribe or finding someone to exercise with. I think even from a safety aspect that can be really good. It also makes you accountable because you're showing up. And one of our research findings, a key finding, was that for people to really get the most out of exercise, they need to feel involved. They need to feel like they're really part of something that has a purpose. And I think, Ian, your story just really captures that sense of achievement and purpose, and being truly involved, not just going to the gym, but actually being part of something.
That kind of idea of protecting our brains, future-proofing it. Mm-hmm. Where is the research on that, Norman?
There's a huge amount of research. None of it is perfect, but you can imagine it's nearly impossible to do a randomized controlled trial on people who exercise 5 times a week versus people who don't do any exercise. But there's a lot of huge amounts of observational studies, again, to suggest that exercise in the round is extremely beneficial and is protective. There was one recent 2022 huge meta-analysis that's looking at a whole load of different publications from a group in Finland who are in Helsinki, who are very interested in lifestyle modification and cognitive protection. And they looked at in this meta-analysis study, they included literally, it was many different studies that had already been published in the literature, looking at over 250,000 people. No, these weren't necessarily people with neurological conditions, but 250,000 people. And this clearly shows that regular exercise is protective against all types of dementia and Alzheimer's disease. So there's a huge amount of future-proofing, or putting money in the bank for your future well-being by exercising, and it's never too late to start exercise either. All the benefits you were mentioning, Eilish, but what exercise also does in people who are getting older, middle age and older, it's really important time of life to be exercising, and it reduces the individual's chances of becoming frail. So in other words, low muscle mass, increased risk of falling, getting a hip fracture. So exercise is for all of the life. stage, not just, people exercise, that's for young people. It's actually extremely important as you get older. It's probably more important as you get older.
I'm always conscious that the word exercise and what it means to different people, and it can be quite scary for some people. And sometimes when I'm talking to people with Parkinson's, I always don't want to tell them what I did because they might feel, that's the level they need to get to. I'm always just, like to say, what couldn't you do yesterday? What could you try and do today? Can you go a little bit further and not push yourself, but just come out of your comfort zone. And I think it has to be tailored for everyone. The exercise piece. You mentioned about falls. And just for my own month of doing that adventure, the first mountain I tried to climb was Mont Blanc, and it's the only mountain I didn't get to the top of. It's the biggest.
You're forgiven.
Yeah, but the guides basically said, look, you'll get to the top, but we're worried about you coming down because you're Parkinson's and your balance and coming down a particular section. And that was fine. The last mountain was Carrantoul. I skipped up it and skipped down it. Just that month of extremely pushing myself, I had no balance issues, absolutely zero balance issues, which just shows that you can, even with a neurological condition, and I do have balance issues with Parkinson's, that when you push the brain and challenge it, that you can actually improve it.
I think with the research that we have and the different types of exercise that are out there, we've got really great options around tailoring exercise to people and to their specific, I suppose, makeup and the way that the condition is affecting them. We know in Parkinson's that exercise to music or that has a good rhythm or a beat, that actually bypasses some of the circuits that are affected in Parkinson's and can really improve movement quality. We know that for people with spinal cord injury, the way it affects their respiratory system, they can do really well with kind of interval type training where they do bouts for sort of 30 or 60 seconds, take a break and then go again. So there's always ways that we can adjust things for what people need so that they can get to where they need to be.
And can we talk, if you don't mind, about what the definition of regular exercise is? I mean, you said, I think the guidelines are anywhere from 150 to 300 minutes a week, divided up, obviously, and it has to be individualized. But I know more and more will ask my patients, for example, do you exercise? And often I'll hear the answer, oh yes, I go to the gym once a week. And I have to say, I'm being, fairly frank with them, and I say, well, actually that doesn't cut it. I mean, that's not enough exercise. We should be exercising, whether it's 3, 4, 5 times a week. You can build exercise into your daily life. I mean, you drive into a big car park in a supermarket, for example, and trying to, instead of going for the parking spot right next to the door, go to the farthest spot away from the door and get out and walk from your car. So there's all sorts. We were talking about the greenways earlier on, and we can maybe talk about public policy a little bit later, but the greenways are more and more available to us now, and get out and walk. But my point is, it's not once a week. That's just not enough.
No, absolutely. And I think the guidelines would say most days of the week. Yeah. But one thing that's really important is that if a 30-minute bout at a time is too much for someone, the great thing is the evidence shows we can accumulate that in smaller bouts. So even a few minutes at a time, and through our everyday activities, in the example that you gave.
And the other excuse that might come up in an Irish context is, well, I can't get out because it's raining too much from from the 1st of November to the end of April and beyond. But if it's lashing rain outside, you can maybe stand on one foot and the other foot for maybe a few minutes at a time. So there are valuable exercises you can do, and you don't even need a gym. You can do in home.
And there's great online classes now for people where home-based exercise is a better fit for them. We know with some neurological conditions, doing certain things can just take longer and more effort. So you mentioned the gym. It can take time to get to the gym. Yeah. If the changing rooms aren't easily accessible, that's a huge physical burden to actually even get started onto the gym floor, never mind starting any exercise. And so it mightn't be worth it, or it might take ages. So plugging in a home-based program then can make something much more feasible where it mightn't be in the way you might have done it before.
And I think that they're all really valid points, but sometimes motivation just isn't there. Sometimes we fall off the wagon. How did you manage to stay on it, Ian?
One of the symptoms of Parkinson's is apathy, and it isn't difficult. Having people around you that motivate you, and definitely your peers. Like I have a guy who's Parkinson's in Wales. We text each other every day to say, what did you do today? And and it's just a bit of accountability, I suppose, is what I'm trying to say. It isn't always easy. I go through 2 or 3 weeks, I mightn't do anything. I directly see how that affects me. My movement is worse, you know, and my mood is worse, everything. I get back exercising and you know, everything improves. So like I see it every day and I know I have to do it. Why don't I do it then is the question. I just think sometimes, you know, back to the apathy and stuff like that, but just having a bit of accountability and someone to do it.
But when you get into a routine, then there's like a positive feedback, because you know you're doing exercise, you feel better, your mental health is better, and you keep going. But if you fall off the wagon, but you get back on it, and it gets positive again.
And it gives, I suppose, you something that it's ownership over it. You can direct it and it empowers you to be doing
definitely and a mix of exercise, like, you know, I do hiking, I do a bit of running, I play team sport, like I play soccer 5-a-side as well, so a little bit of everything. I don't think there's one exercise fits everyone. I try and go to the gym, but I don't go to the gym 5 days a week. I'll try and run, I'll try and go to the gym, I'll try and play a game of soccer, so that's what helps me, you know, and I suppose it's different for everyone. There's a bit of variety.
When we talk to people with the lived experience of trying to be active, that responsiveness in the community is something that really helps them. So for example, if they play a team sport and the coach knows a little bit about their condition and how to support them, or if they're in school, so I do a lot of work with children and teenagers, and they'll talk about when the PE teacher knows how to tweak something so that I can do it, that really means a lot. So there is great work being done. I think there's great willingness among Sport Ireland, the national governing bodies for sport, groups like the Irish Wheelchair Association Sport. They have a great suite of exercise options and expertise that's based in the community and that's accessible for people.
The medical profession in broad terms could up their game on this, because you know, you have somebody like Ian with Parkinson's disease and goes into their neurologist, and probably 99% of the consultation time, which is already going to be very short, unfortunately, will be around how are you doing and what are we going to do, we need to change your medication and how are we going to change your medication, and it might be an afterthought as the patient's gone out the door, by the way, are you exercising? So that needs to be improved upon. I think there's significant improvement needed there. We talked about, but there are positive things happening in terms of public policy. The expansion of the greenways system in Ireland is fantastic, and that's a real positive resource. There's also a movement now in medicine itself around social prescribing, and we're not prescribing medications anymore, but we're going back to prescribing activities like physical exercise. We now talk about green prescribing for nature and blue prescribing, you know, walk on the beach for half an hour, maybe that would be one of your, if you got access to a beach, maybe that would be one of your exercise activities every week. So there is, I think, an improved appreciation of all those factors, but there needs to be, I think, a public education campaign around all of the protective factors. The World Health Organization now talk about 12 modifiable risk factors for the prevention of dementia. In general, I know I'm focusing on dementia, but it is already a huge problem, and as people live longer, it's going to be a bigger problem. There is some work that if you can modify those 12 modifiable risk factors positively, then you'll reduce the incidence of dementia by about 40%, which is fairly extraordinary.
I think that kind of pause there really is because it's such a huge number to think that we can proactively do something about that.
People think that the variety of things like the treatment of high blood pressure, hypertension, or stopping smoking is all about heart health, which it is, but it's not all about heart health. A lot of dementia is caused by vascular problems within the brain, so it's the same condition. And in fact, a lot of what we call Alzheimer's clinically is a mixture between Alzheimer's, neurodegeneration, and vascular disease in the brain. So it all interlinks. But again, we don't talk about it enough. From a societal point of view, we talk about it in the clinic, but we don't talk about it enough as a public health measure.
Yeah, there's definitely work to be done there. You talked about in clinic, sometimes it's at the end of the consultation where it's mentioned.
If it happens at all.
If it happens. Ian, for you, visiting your healthcare professionals, was it something that was addressed with you? Were you advised of it? And if not, what would you like to have heard? What did you want to hear in those consultations?
Again, yeah, it's very about the medicine side of things. You know, exercise was mentioned, but it wasn't too much of an emphasis on it. I learnt more from peer groups. You know, I was very lucky to meet a girl when I was diagnosed as 38. I met a girl who was 27. My brother happened to know her and introduced me. and she just had such a great outlook on things, and I learned so much from her. And she introduced me to a young group of people with early onset Parkinson's disease, and which I got very much involved with, and all that just helps. And I know how much I got from meeting people that had the condition when I was younger, and I just want to do the same and try and meet other people, because it really does help. You learn so much. You learn more from talking to each other than you will from your neurologist.
Ailish, you did some really nice work with a group of adolescents, looking at what their priorities were. And some of those, there was a really nice piece, the top 10 priorities. The first one, which was quite staggering, was to be treated like everyone else. And then other ones were around, again, access and education. Can you just take us through some of the kind of really key findings?
Yeah, so we did a national study of adolescents who had physical disability. So half of them had a condition, cerebral palsy, and the other half had different types of brain injury and other mix of genetic and neurological conditions. And we asked them to tell us what really mattered to them when it comes to physical activity participation. And the reason we did this was because we'd done research before looking at the benefits of exercise, like I spoke about at the beginning, and we showed the benefits of exercise from things like strength training and Pilates, but it was really difficult for young people to actually keep up those activities once the program actually stopped, which inevitably, as research always delivers an intervention for a set period of time, and then it's over. So we asked them what really matters to you, and to give us their free text kind of comments. So they've just wrote in, and we got responses from 116, I think, teenagers around the country living in all different counties of Ireland. And you're right, the top priority was to be treated the same as everyone else. And one of the respondents wrote something really powerful. They said, I have the same hopes, fears, dreams as anybody else, and I'd like that to be recognised in the way that I take part in exercise. Another one of the priorities was around people's preferences. So they really understood actually the benefits of exercise, which was a really nice finding, because it said to us, we don't need to educate these young people about the benefits of exercise. They're actually really well informed, but what they wanted was activities that matched their preferences, and where they had something that was local and that gave them choice, and where they could really get involved. The type of involvement people wanted depends. Some people really want to exercise with people who are like them, so it's similar challenges. Some people just want to be with their friends in the playground, regardless of what everyone's background is. So I think what really stuck with us on that is around that community piece, and that's really where people want to be active, and they want to be active for the same reasons as we all do. But it's just about making the adaptations, and some of those adaptations can be really simple and practical things. I was struck by what you said about learning so much from your peer support groups, and I think that's around the tricks of the trade a little bit, around what works, walking with hiking poles, switching from an upright bike to a recumbent bike, changing your strengthening exercises from ones you do standing to ones you do seated. There's so many possibilities within what people can do, but it's around making it inclusive, making it enjoyable, letting people feel that there's a purpose, so that it's not a chore. Because I think if we make it a chore, another thing that you have to tick off your list to tell your neurologist when you go in to see them, then we're not going to make it stick.
And Ian, would you have experienced that also, that you found when you maybe didn't do exercise for a couple of weeks, that you had still that kind of, you'd banked the movement before the exercise that you'd done?
Definitely. I ran a marathon last year, and haven't ran for a long period of time. Went out the other day and ran 5, 6, 7 or 8k, which I would never have been able to do before. So obviously it was still in my legs. I actually thought I wouldn't be able to do it at all. So it is there. Obviously it takes you a while to get back to certain levels, but it's definitely there. I did a hike last week. I hadn't done hiking in ages. One I used to do all the time. I couldn't finish it because I hadn't done it in ages, and my legs were at me. So it doesn't always work out. I went back 2 days ago and did the same hike, and I was fine. So
there's a new phrase, well, maybe it's not a new phrase, but a phrase that people now use, that movement as medicine.
Yeah.
So, and there's another one I heard, which is a little bit corny, but I'll say it anyway, that sitting is the new smoking. Yeah.
That piece about exercise is a really good way of kind of handing your ego back to you, and that resilience piece about you go out and you can't do something maybe you did before, but then the next time you go out and you achieve more and more,
I suppose
and those
it
setbacks.
depends on the person. I have competitive nature. I'm kind of competitive with myself, and that's how I motivate myself. You know, I still think I can run the time that I ran 15 years ago, and but it's whatever motivates yourself, whether it's, you know, having a group that you do certain exercise with. There is a lot of groups out there that, you know, like especially for Parkinson's, there's boxing for Parkinson's, non-contact, okay? It's not, but it's about the rhythm and the motion and the timing, etc.
Tai Chi.
Tai Chi as well. I threw the kitchen sink at it when I got diagnosed. I tried everything, and I obviously pulled back from there, you know. But I thought I tried all the diets, I tried all the different exercises, trying to find the one that was going to cure me. But, you know, a bit of everything kind of.
But now you do the one that you enjoy, probably,
exactly.
or the one
That's a
you
very good
enjoy
point.
most.
Yeah, exactly.
It is saying.
Where are we going with this in terms of, Ailish, the research? Tech, AI is, you know, the new buzzword. Where are we going with exercise?
I mean, there is research being done on sort of high-tech options, you know, things like virtual reality and apps to track lots of different things, you know, from sleep to progress. And, you know, they can make it really interesting and enjoyable and motivating for people. But actually, for me, the most important thing is around community, and that's where our group's research is moving to now, in forging partnerships between healthcare professionals and people with lived experience and community exercise providers, things like referrals that go both ways, so that a physiotherapist could attend a gym in an ideal world with someone and give the person on the ground there, the gym instructor, some guidance on those adaptations, and that the gym instructor could contact them back if there's issues around pain that needs to be addressed. So I think some kind of flow of information over and back, and definitely I think the societal piece you mentioned earlier, Norman, this is definitely a whole of society problem. And I think, you know, I do often say to people with neurological conditions, what can you do? But it's also about all of us, like what can we all do that actually supports wider participation in activity among the community and among those in our communities. So yeah, I think very much focusing on partnerships, which is quite low tech and maybe doesn't sound as exciting as the apps and the VR and all that stuff, but actually I think that's where we'll get the most progress, just based on what we've heard from the people that we've spoken to and our research participants. They've been so strong. The study that you mentioned earlier, sometimes when you do studies where you're trying to get agreement on things, you get agreement of like 50-60% of people. In that study we had 80-90% agreement. They were all so in agreement on what they wanted to see happen in that regard.
And Ian, from your point of view, where would you like to see this going?
I just think, you know, yes, with technology, but, you know, you still have to exercise. You know, it's still your own personal choice, you know, and there's no machine or no AI that can get you off your bum and get you out there. And back to what I mentioned a few times, the peer support, your family support, you know, colleagues and stuff like that can really help. I mentioned a guy texts me every day from Wales, you know, just to motivate each other. And, you know, I'd like to see human connection continue rather than AI, you know, and I think that's probably hopefully the best way forward.
Norman?
I agree, it's not about high tech, it's about the simple stuff that we can do quite easily. There needs to be more public health messaging, and part of what we're doing, I suppose, is around education, but there needs to be a Department of Health or HSE sort of public health campaigns or reminders, not just about exercise, but all the other modifiable factors that can improve our longevity and our cognitive reserve as we get older. So I think it's about education.
The three of you have really given us so much there that really this is a positive thing that we have control over, that we can take part in, that has real benefits to us going forward currently and moving forward. For the three of you, what's the number one thing, your take-home message for today? What would you like our audience to take away? Ailish, we might come to you first.
Yeah, I think it's maybe the bit that I said already, that there is an activity that suits everyone, that works for everyone. We and society and people and their families just need to help them find it and stick at it.
Okay, and Ian?
Support each other, you know. Someone that's struggling, give them a helping hand. Try things that you haven't tried before. You mightn't like it, at least you tried it.
And enjoy it.
Yeah, you'll find something that you'll enjoy.
And regular exercise is not once a week or not once every 2 weeks going to the gym. I mean, it can be built into your daily routine. Obviously, you're not going to do exercise every day. People are busy, but you know, it's at least 3-4 times a week, and mix it up. It can be different types of exercise, and you can exercise in Ireland even if it's raining.
Thanks so much for being with us today. A big thank you to our guests, Ailish, Ian and Norman, for sharing your stories, your expertise. We hope that today's conversation gave you something to take away. Feel free to explore our resources and share them with someone who might need it. And most importantly, take care of yourself. Thanks for being with us. Until next time.